This is my first speech, so we'll see how this goes. and like my classwork, a lot of times we have to do an impromptu, and we have to shift gears, right, on things, different things, depending on what comes up to me. I'm Darryl Togashi. As you can tell, I've had some experience with Ivy Tech, and I used to be at Indiana Tech, and now I'm at Purdue Global and work with Purdue and different things. Also interface with AU and their counterparts and talk with them about some of the stuff that they're doing, which is some good things, which we'll get into a little bit later. I'll promote you a little later. I also wear multiple hats. I'm also the vice president for the InfraGurad Indiana, which is the public-facing part that interfaces with the FBI. So I do work with that, and I'm also the, I do have a page on this, I think. I do. I'm an adjunct at Ivy Tech still, and then I'm also the director for the CCDC competition for Indiana in the Midwest region. I help them out. So I have a lot of different hats that I do and get involved with the different things along the way. I'm always promoting all the different events and trying to get, in Indiana, trying to get cybersecurity kind of going a little bit and trying to make sure that it kind of stays in here to try to promote some of our students. We got a lot of good programs across the state. We got a lot of good things happening on there. I think we all have that same problem. It's not always publicized or propagated out and getting to the right people to be able to try to think, especially, parents who have young students and that, and they're trying to get into some of these things is kind of difficult to understand. I used to be there, and it was really difficult to understand the logistics as to, okay, what do my kids need to do to even get into some of these things that, I think they're interested in or that I'm interested in for them. So depending on which way you go with that. Here's some of the topics I'm going to cover, and it's a very short list, but I want to cover some of the things in there that are more, what I'm looking at is the process and the procedure, and some of the things that are good on some of these things, and some of the things that we'd like to try to see if we can change. I mean, with the advent of COVID and trying to do things remotely, a lot of majors have had problems with trying to say, well, we need hands-on. If I need to control this controller, I can't do it virtually. Well, you can, but it's not the same, right? Or if I'm trying to put I remember we had problems with A+, right? I'm trying to put a memory chip in. I said, well, you just feel it and you feel the click. You know that the memory chip is in. Well, it's hard to emulate that when you're trying to do that virtually and those kind of things. So fortunately, and maybe unfortunately, depending on what part of cybersecurity that you are trying to teach, you can do a lot of that virtually and still get the same results on things. Whereas some of the things, like if you're talking physical security, you're talking about physical attributes that you're trying to do with the particular machines or like your data center and those kind of things, it's a little bit tougher to do that. But a lot of organizations have gone to cloud, right? So that's all virtual. But you have to have an understanding of what your data center and what your environment's going to be there and the different types of configurations that you're going to have out there, as you probably all know already. So, okay, I'm going to start out. It's more than theory, and I thought about this, and I'm kind of portraying a very negative attitude towards labs, but I'm trying to make a point here, and I'll state that in a second. Cybersecurity labs, the traditional way, usually is the result-oriented, right? I give you this problem, and it's kind of, they treat it, no offense to math, but they treat it like a math problem where you have this formula, and you always have to have this answer, and that's definitely not true, as we know in cybersecurity. I may have this situation, but it may end up being a totally different avenue of things. And then this is, I'm repeating, it's kind of like only one answer to the particular problem. Now, and then we're going to talk later on as to how I'm looking at, as we treat these a little bit differently. We can still have the same cybersecurity labs, but we can treat it a little bit differently in how we train, because the problem that I see in students coming out of a lot of programs is that they have the theoretical knowledge and they may have that, but if I put them in front of a computer or in the SOC or trying to look at a SIM or try to manage some rules or something like that, they have a hard time understanding exactly what they need to do for that. Which is a problem for the business owners in that are trying to hire these students, because yes, they want to train them, but no, they don't want to train them from scratch and say, well, hey, here, push this button right here, and that'll turn that on, and maybe it'll work. And if it doesn't work, then I am not going to walk you through this to trying to figure out, well, when I first came in here, I think I connected to the wrong plug, and it didn't work. Well, I wasn't going to go crying to the AV people and trying to see that right away. You kind of fiddle around and do different things with that. And then a lot of times it's memorization. What I don't like about some classes is that I'm sitting here and seeing cybersecurity, and all I do is memorize, oh, there are 7 threat actors, and these are the titles of these 7 threat actors, and this is how I'm memorizing them. And to a certain point, theory and memorization is important, because if I talk to you about an IP segmentation or IPv4, or I'm talking about this particular protocol, you have to have some kind of idea about my terminology of what I'm talking about. But it's the application of that terminology as to how does it apply to the different scenarios and the different things that we are working towards that makes a difference on things. So like I talked to you about, an example I use in classes when I was doing in programming is I'll talk to and say, here's a database server and here's a web server, and it's obvious they're on 2 different networks. And some students will look at me like, how do you know? I have the IP address and the subnet mask up there, So you should be able to identify that immediately and say, oh yeah, they're on a different network. What does that mean? That means as a programmer, if I'm trying to connect to my database server and it does not connect, that means there's probably a router in between that doesn't have the rules set up correctly. And what port is your database listening to? What kind of database are you using? MySQL? You're using Microsoft SQL? Are you using the default port? Or like I said when we explained in the cloud, sorry, I'm going off, but when you're doing in a cloud, what we did is on a cloud, we used a different port that connected to our public router, and then in our router, we use that port and we used a rule to port it to the traditional port when it's in the internal network. So we didn't have to change anything internally and that kind of stuff. So we had to do some manipulation of understanding the router, understanding the pathway over the public internet, whether it was secure or not, understanding the configuration on the cloud. And you have all these different things that, you kind of have to look through, and not everything is set up the same, right? And what? They apply an update to the system, you got a new version, now you're configuring things differently. Kind of like Microsoft changes where he puts how you configure a network card for all. Please. It's a common configuration that I need to worry about and those kind of things. So, okay. This and cyber ranges. I'm going to use this one as an example. Let me, before I get started into this talk, cyber ranges, there are plenty out there. And I'm going to talk about that more in the cybersecurity as a service area. But the cyber ranges can be, basically the premise of a cyber range is that a lot of times it's a portal or an environment that's dedicated to being able to throw out whatever scenarios you can have. So depending on how complex your scenario you want, or how much control you want in terms of changing things, that will depend on which kind of environment. But yes?
What do you do if you're IT, so public school, and your IT director sees things like this, or PIDCO CTF, and they say, we're not opening those ports.
Sorry.
That's my bad. I'll take that one.
I've never had that conversation. Yes, I have. Okay. Okay, yes. I'll say it this way. What I usually do is I talk to the director of IT, or like in Ivy Tech's place. When I was at Ivy Tech, the scenario was they had a local director for IT there. So I went and talked to him, and I told him, this is my situation. I guess I could. Can I draw?
Do it.
Can I go over here? Is that okay? The teacher and me. Well, I had a GRE network here, which had several, I'll just do it real simply that way. And then it had a connection, and it had to the main Ivy Tech network, right? So, but there was communication backwards and forwards between the two. What I wanted to do is I had also a VMware host, or an EXSI, and the vCenter, and controlled by the vCenter here in this. And I had this similar situation at Tech, and we had this conversation on things. So the problem is that if you set it up generically and you needed internet access to that, yes, right? These guys are going to be able to see this environment, and vice versa. And if I'm running an attack or a DDoS attack on there, that could bleed over into the other segments or the other networks that that would cause a problem. They're going to panic, or they're going to fire me, one of the two. I don't know which first. No, they'll find me first, stop the problem, and then fire me. I think that's the order. But with that being said, what we used here is I segment that off. I used pfSense. I segmented that classroom environment off by that. Plus, I used a different virtual router and a virtual network card I configured in the vCenter for that particular environment. And then the virtual machines that are in there, in that environment, I connected to the second card in there. And they had to get all their DHCP stuff over here, and this was also using a DNS as well. And then this was a routing out to, I'll just call it a WAN. That's to the internet. So this was actually really going to that, and then I controlled everything. I created this pfSense image, and I controlled the pathway going out into that. So when I have my machines in here, I'll just call them PCs for lack of a better term, and let's say I had a server. Actually, more so, I had a Metasploitable 2 machine in there which had vulnerability on it, and I attacked that machine. Then it stayed within this network, the traffic on there. I even sometimes, depending on how much caution I wanted to do, I would not have the access out this way. I would turn that WAN link off, and then it would just have everything local.
Would you run a firewall between pfSense and the WAN at all?
No, I did not. Well, the firewall was kind of in here, but so that's where I was controlling it by my routes and whether I had the WAN link active. And then what I did is I also communicated with the IT director and told him when I was running these classes that would doing this. So I said every Tuesday, Thursday at 1 o'clock, I'm running my penetration test class or ethical hacking class during that time. And here's my cell phone number because I know you can get it, but I'll give it to you anyway. And you call me if there's a problem, and he says, come here, we'll stop things immediately if we need to, or whatever the case may be. So they were aware of my situation, and then it made them a little bit comfortable, kind of. It took a lot of talking.
Kind of.
Well, it took a lot of talking and convincing that indeed what I was trying to do here was actually doable. And I actually got the CISO. I said, no, why don't you come one evening or whatever when I'm setting this thing up, and you come and you watch me, and this is what I'm doing. I'll show you what I'm doing. And after a while, they felt comfortable with what I was doing, and they said, okay, yeah, that's fine. Go ahead and do it that way. So that's how I did that. I controlled it usually because we were fortunate to have an EXSI and vCenter. I had a whole VMware environment on that. The other option that I've noticed at a poor man's environment was I also used we used VirtualBox or VMware on a local machine or a server or something like that, and then we isolated the network using the local environment that way, and try so that it doesn't propagate out to any of the other stuff. I mean, especially when I'm creating payloads and malware. Yeah. I don't know why IT gets so excited about it. I don't know why. But that is.
Trade professionals, don't worry about it. It'll be fine.
I'm testing your sim out to see if the rules catch it. Which we did. We were at Tech. We were doing one that we had to be very careful with because we were bypassing the Defender firewall using a fileless malware that we had created, and we had to be very careful and make sure that was isolated. So a lot of times too was in addition to talking to the IT, but also in talking about processes and procedures that we are putting in place to make sure that we can catch things before it gets too out of hand or anything like that, or we make sure things are in precaution. We have these checks. I might be checking. I'll check this guy, I'll check this guy, I'll check this. I might run some simple pings out to the internet or something like that to see if it still goes, or if I'm working on a particular protocol like a DNS poison or something like that, I double check the 53 port or something to that effect. So I run these different checks that are non-intrusive first and say, okay, yeah, it's not going to go beyond there. It's just going to be isolated. I did bring down our lab one time. I was doing a DNS poison that didn't quite work the way it was supposed to. but fortunately, it was only the lab. It only brought down the lab. It didn't bring down anything in the regular school's network. So the protection now worked actually the way it was supposed to. But that's how I run things on that. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah. That's why a lot of times with these cyber ranges, you are logging into a portal.
Right.
And then in that portal, they have something similar configured for each person that's logging in or a group of people, however your range is set up.
Sometimes that portal is blocked by our firewalls. That's the problem.
Okay. So
doing it locally or paying for a software is basically what we've got. Like Project Lead the Way has a cybersecurity server that they tie with Amazon.
okay.
And so we can log into the Amazon stuff and do our lessons.
Okay.
But it's not experimental. It's not.
It's just you get what they get. You get what you get, and you can't change anything.
That's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we added any extra challenge, most of the time those ports are blocked.
Within
Within
the portal?
What is it? Any of the capture the flag stuff, like Pico CTF.
I mean, blocked from the school
Yeah.
network to there.
So the kids can't log into their stuff and go and give
Oh,
those
you're
words.
talking about some of the CTS that you can do a VPN from your local machine and get access to that? Okay, yeah, yeah, that I never had to do a conversation about that because we tried to avoid that.
Yeah.
You know, there are others where most of them either you were literally just logging to the portal site and everything's done in there,
Right.
or you are, you know, an isolated local environment. So those are the two ways we went about that. Because you're talking about like Hack the Box or something, I think,
Yeah.
that does the VPN stuff.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. So that's kind of good when you got students that want to do that from home, you know, and kind of and then play around with it that way or play around it independently.
Right.
But yeah, you're right. When you're doing a school, you're doing a lesson. The only do an open VPN to your home machine and then display that VPN into the machine, and you can show them how it's done that way.
This is why I showed up. This is why I showed up right there.
And that way you can do it from your home thing, and you're good to go. And you can just demonstrate it. Or the other way I've done it before is sometimes I'll videotape a particular thing at home where it does work, and then I show them in the video, and then I'll explain to them that way, and then they can try that as well. So you know, there's different ways that you can kind of get around that. Because yes, I know, I try to limit how much I really ask the IT to let go, because I do understand. I used to be a network administrator. I understand their side where, you know, hey, you know, because at first they wouldn't allow me to do any of that. I said, and they said, well, that one IT manager, I won't even mention his name, said, well, I don't see why that would be a problem. I said, do you really want inexperienced students running a malware on your environment or attacking your DNS server when they're not really sure what machine they're attacking yet? You know, because we talked about all that as to what machines you should attack and not attack and all that kind of stuff. But so there's, I did a little bit of, there's a little bit of conversation as to, you have to be pretty clear as to what you want to try to do with the students and what class it's doing it for. And you have your justification as to saying, you know, okay, this is an ethical hacking class. I don't know how to run a lab without ethically hacking something, you know, doing a cross-site scripting, you know, and how do I know I'm doing it on the right machine? Because, you know, I can do an Nmap or I can do a netco on a public, bless you, on one of the schools domains, you know, and find out all this OSINT information, but, you know, they might, their SIM or whatever they're doing to, you know, protect things, you know, they may not like that because it's showing this activity and they're not sure exactly why that activity is being shown. And then it causes more resources to be allocated to that because now it's a yellow flag and you got to figure out, you know, why is that happening and that kind of stuff. So I just try to be cautious and let them know from my side that I am being cautious too. That, you know, I want to train them. I need to do this because my biggest argument has always been I needed to load applications to teach them the application on the lab machines, and they wouldn't allow that because it wasn't a sanctioned thing. And finally, I was able to talk up the ladder enough to say, hey, if it's in the curriculum and it says I need to load, you know, run Wireshark, I need Wireshark in a lab that I can run, you know, or else I can't teach Wireshark. And I'm not going to teach you by, okay, see this picture right here? This is how you do a filter, you know? And oh, by the way, you might see this packet, you might not see this packet if you run this, you know, those kind of things. So anyways, but you know my frustration on that side. But that's usually my bigger frustration, is not loading the right applications than it is that, because that's a little bit more obvious, and then when they see how I'm running that, 9 out of 10 times they usually are okay with it. They'll do it within reservation. I say, well, just please let me run it for a couple of weeks and tell me if you run into problems. And then if you do, then I'll stop and we'll try to figure out why. Because actually that would be the class's problem, right? We would give you the problem and say, okay, well, why are we bleeding into the network when we should be isolated? You know, so where is it bleeding into? You know, how does it know what destination's IP address? You know, so I could turn it into a whole lesson and say, okay, let's find out what, you know, do some capturing and try to figure that out. But, you know, we got to be limited on that. Does that answer your question, sort of?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Or sometimes I'll bring in my own laptop, which I have VirtualBox in here, and then I'll run the example here, displaying it this way, but this won't be on the network. And then I could show it that way. So if you don't want to do it at home, or you don't want to do the video, and then the one thing I don't like about videos is it's static, right? So that I can't say what if. Okay, what if I do this? You know, instead of doing port 80, I'm going to do 53, or I'm going to do an ICMP packet capture. And this is how it looks differently, or this is how I can filter that out in that general capture thing, kind of thing. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay. So with that being said, that leads into, here's one that's free. It's a nice challenge. And if you have an educational email, you can get into it, and I'll tell you some positives and negatives of it. Generally, what's positive about a predetermined or pre-built cyber range that you're not building yourself, what's nice is you don't have to build all those scenarios yourself. Because as we know, if I'm building a particular scenario or particular vulnerability, sometimes that takes a lot of setup and a lot of different things to do. So if I'm doing it off of a pre-built one, a lot of times if they have that scenario in there, I can more try to figure out exactly how to run that and then how to answer the questions that the students may be running into problems with onto that. So those are the two big things that I find with pre-built ones, and then we'll talk about, when you talk about cybersecurity as a service, we'll talk about those that are it's in between, that allow you to do flexibility, or you talk to the administrator and you can do flexibility that way with some of the stuff they already have. So that's the link, and but I did some screenshots to kind of save, just in case I didn't have internet access. Never know, right? But a lot of times when you log into this, if you notice here, it has a work role, and this happens to be just a cyber defense analyst, but there's a whole different series of different things. It's technical. And in the stars, it also tells you whether there's a difficulty level, and then the challenge title gives you a general idea of what it is. And also the OS that it's challenging on, which is kind of nice because it gives you a little bit of flexibility. If I'm wanting to do a network anomaly in the packet capture edition, I might look into that and take a look at that. So let me do that. I deducted out some information that they have in here, but this generally will give you, there's the tabs, if you see the tabs at the challenge, known issues, network map, strategy, and then a nice framework stuff. That gives you a general idea of what the student's going to see and what kind of challenge or what kind of scenario that they're doing on there. And you can kind of read through all that. And as an administrator, when you register, they'll give you administrator account, so I can invite students. Once I create some challenges, I'm not going to show you how to do that, but you can create the challenges in there, and then I can invite the students to have access to that, and then I'll use their email to get into the account, and then they'll get an invitation link, and then they'll be able to get into this and then do these challenges. And then I'll be able to see the grading and what they've done and how long they've done and what kind of answers they've done on that. So it's all built in on that, which is kind of nice. The known issues is, I didn't screenshot that, but that's just, I think, known issues for the lab itself, that they know that sometimes some things work one way or another. Then they give you the, I think, which one was that? That was the network map. And they'll give you something similar to this, and they'll give you an idea of how that's set up. This particular one has it set up this way. So you get an idea of what the concept is and how everything is going. I use a lot of times this map, if I'm explaining the lab, to talk about the firewall segmentation, where things are at, and how you recognize some of that stuff. So it kind of delves into their mind as to, you know, if I'm sitting on this server and I'm trying to get connected to this, or I'm on this desktop and I'm trying to get to this server, you know, what pathway does it need to take? And if it has, and how do I troubleshoot that if I can't make it through there? So one of my last labs, we were configuring the pfSense interfaces, and we were adding a DMZ interface, and we were configuring things, and they were having problems getting to the path. And one of many problems that they were having was they were trying to test it from the wrong segment of the network. And then the other one was that they configured the IP address wrong. The IP address was correct, but the subnet mask was the wrong subnet mask. You know, I was trying to explain to them, just because it has the same IP address section, you know, that doesn't mean that it necessarily is on the same network. It's a pairing of the two. So we talk through all that and get them to kind of understand that concept of things, and following the data, being able to go through those. But with this, it's kind of nice that it's already pre-set up for me, so all I have to do is focus on possible scenarios and problems and kind of walk them through this, and this is what they're going to see when they get in there. And I don't have to set up any of that, because that's a lot of setup right there, as we all know, right? And then, if you're a CAE school, which you soon will be, yes, 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 good. You have the knowledge units, and they kind of, with the CAE schools, they kind of map your knowledge units to your classes and all this kind of stuff. What's kind of nice about this is that if I have class A and I'm running these labs, I can say, oh, here are some of the knowledge units that are covered in this particular one, because I'm running labs, and I can specifically say which lab or which assignment, you know, as sometimes they want you to point out on. So that makes it really nice with that, and kind of outlines that as what's going on with that. Okay. That was a short, but there are other cyber ranges out there. There's another one called cyber.org, which is only for K-12, but it's free for educators, and you can sign up for that, and then you can get access to some of their classes that they have in there, and be able to publish them and push them out to only K-12 students. There's another one called by Cisco. If you're a Cisco Academy, there is Skills for All. There is an environment in there that also, I apologize, I don't have the screenshots for that, but that also has free cyber security classes and different types of classes, programming classes, a whole list of different things for that. It's called Skills for All. If you're a Academy, Cisco Academy, you should have access to that. And if you don't, you can talk to your Cisco contact in Claudine. It's probably Claudine in Indiana, because that's who I talked to and got access to it via Purdue Global. And there's a whole series of classes out there that you can go and make available to students for free. And I don't think that's restricted to K-12. So So if you want beginning students, you guys have it, you're good. But if you want beginning students to kind of get an introduction thing on there, you can look through some of those classes and you can kind of, or they need help, you know, you can do that. Because I think I found one out there that was a Wireshark class that I was thinking to give into my students because, you know, that one atrocious Wireshark lab that was, oh, I'm not sure if I even mentioned that. Introduction to cybersecurity, no networking. They had a deep dig into DNS and HTTP packet tracing and trying to figure out what's in the packets and how to do the handshaking and all that kind of stuff. So it was kind of interesting. But there's a simple Wireshark one because they all really needed to know is how to do the filters and understand, you know, how to navigate in the packets and start to a beginning of that and understanding the protocols. Because obviously I expect them to know what a DNS is and HTTPS and what protocols those are in. I would expect them to know that. So, and if not, they can learn it pretty easily. They should be able to. Okay. Now, I might not be exactly accurate, but here are some organizations in Indiana that I've recently and have, many times have been associated with that have types of services. And the services range from apprenticeships to, I think Cyberbit is here with the range, the cyber range and that kind of stuff. And they have all these services into it for different reasons and different research, as you can see with IU and that kind of stuff. But they have these different availabilities. Part of the other hat that I wear with InfraGurad is we're talking about, you know, trying to get a collaborative communication of cybersecurity throughout Indiana. With higher education, as well as with industry, and trying to see if we can get, you know, try to figure out what the missing links are in how to approach things and different things with that. I'm going to lead into some of that in a little bit here, and forgive me, I'm going to apologize ahead of time. I'm going to fly through some of these individually, but I'm not, if you can elaborate better than I, then that'd be perfect. So CyberTap is the one with Matt Tramsky. I think he's the one that they're the one with the Cyberbit, right? I think so. Yeah, they have apprenticeships and that kind of stuff going. I'm just going to kind of run through these real quick. I'm not sure who these guys are, but can you elaborate?
Yeah, so the Center for Security Studies and Cyber Defense is a unit within Anderson University, a separate entity for many of our programs and departments, and they're just now coming online less than a year from being stood up and beginning to work with different small businesses, houses of worship, different folks in sort of East Central Indiana, helping them think through security and cyber issues. Currently employs about a dozen of our students in internships doing a variety of
So you have these right in your back door, these types of opportunities and that kind of stuff. So I wanted to point that out, that the way these organizations are working, and correct me if I'm wrong, but they're trying to pull in people in general. They're not saying, you know, they may be focused in the Marion County or whatever, but you know, these are for any of your students that may have the opportunity. I'm looking into it for the Purdue Global students in terms of I'm in their capstone class. I'm having some of these people talk in that capstone class, talking about their opportunities of internships or apprenticeships or different other things that could be happening. Plus, from the InfraGurad side, I want to try to introduce some of these things to the industry to make them aware of the fact that, you know, we got some pathways that are coming out through some of these things that allow you to be able to do some training. Some of these places, they have scholarships and grants, so they're funded, so not every time is it costed to you. So you just have to kind of contact them or go to these websites and contact whoever, you know, their contact is, and to talk to them about the different services or opportunities that you know you may want to try to look into for your students and that kind of stuff. Here's Indiana University. I knew about this, but it's more looks like for research and that, and talking about risk, compliance, and those kind of things on that. So if your student's wanting to go to graduate school or something like that, that's this one with Scott. And then the last one is Sirius with Dr. Spafford. Dr. Spafford. And some of the things that they're doing over at Purdue proper. So it's, I just kind of want to make those aware. And as I get to know more of these opportunities and that, I'm trying to fill out that map that we had in the beginning. I'm trying to fill out this map in the beginning so we know, you know, what Indiana can support and all that. So, you know, and then we can kind of show that to the industry, and then, you know, we can kind of do a path forward, you know. So like we do Cyber Patriots, we do Gen Cyber, and we do the cyber.org for the K-12, and try to get them introduced and understand that here's some pathways up to here, and then we have these industries that are associated with these particular educational units that can help you kind of get a job, you know. And you know, selfishly, we also want to try to keep everybody in Indiana, or try to, you know, keep them close at home and that. So that's kind of the other thing, is to, you know, show them that we have these opportunities out here. I think one of the major problems that we have with our cybersecurity and other things is that we don't really, we're kind of humble. We kind of like quietly say, we 100% our students got hired, you know, no big deal. You know, well, yeah, that's a big deal. Because if I have a student that wants to go to a college, I want them to go to there, or I want them to go to one of these organizations to help out, you know, help me get ahead of the pain. Because as we know, in theory, there's a lot of people out there that are supposedly tying for these jobs, but not all of them are qualified. And I think I'm running low on time, so sorry. And I'm going to fly. Okay. Alternative learning. I'm going to fly through this a little bit. And this is kind of, coming from an educator, it is kind of scary, right? You know, not to have, you know, relating to or being a person who learns or has learned without the benefit of a teacher or formal education, self-taught. Now, the way I look at this is this way, is that if I give you a problem, I taught you some things, and I'm hoping that you have the tool or the mindset to say that, okay, if I'm lucky, I'll get the problem right the first time, right? But you're smart, so you probably will anyway, but that's beside the point, right? So, but if you don't, you don't quit right there. You have to have the mindset to say, okay, what did I do wrong? You know, or what was wrong with that? So that's the part that I was thinking, I was approaching with this, is that not all the time do you, when you are, and I'll start out here, in the beginning with like capture the flag, let me explain it this way. A lot of times with capture the flag, you get a question and you get the answer. It's kind of like that thing that I said in the labs. You know, you're saying, okay, I got this and I only get this answer and that's the right answer, so I'm okay with that. Okay, so that's okay, but on some of these capture the flags and some of these evolution of things, what we neglect to say is how they got there. What was their solution? So a lot of times I have students in my class when they're talking about different things, they come up with a different answer. And I don't immediately say, oh yeah, you're wrong. But I'm going to say, well, how did you get there? What did you do to get that answer? Show me. You know? And they'll walk me through. And sometimes they're right. You know? And they come up with a solution, but it's the pathway that they come up to the solution may not always be the same way, you know, the way I'm thinking. Now, I'm going to tell them the way I would solve it, right? Because, you know, I want them to have at least an option. But then they come forward and say, that's totally wrong. Because I want them to think on their own. I want them to come up with the idea that's saying, hey, this is the way I did that. I like your idea, and I could maybe use that idea as a plan B, but this is the way I was thinking through it, and this is what I found out, and it looked like it worked. And I'm saying, okay, that's cool. Because flag equals solutions in that, and CTF measures the results of the solution, but they don't come up with the creating of the solution. So I can, well, what's 2 + 2? And you tell me 4, and okay, let me tell you a story. In grade school, I got in trouble for this very straight question. And both my mom and dad are dead, so I can blame my father, so my mom doesn't get upset. But I was asked in grade school what 2 + 2 was. And I said, I don't know. Well, count it out. I said, well, it's hard for me to figure out what 2 + 2 is because I don't know whether it's 2 gallons or 2 pints or 2 quarts. And I can't figure out what the answer is. Because just previously, ironically, my father was talking to me. He's a chemical engineer. He says, numbers don't mean anything unless you put, like if it's a quart or, ounce or something like that. And then if it's not the same, then you got to convert them and then you got to add them together. And I said, okay, that makes sense. Well, ironically, it was the night before. And so I'm taking that in my mind. He's asked me 2 + 2. Well, I don't know what 2 + 2, what is it, 2 quarts, 2 gallons, And the teacher was getting really mad at me. But that goes to the point where a lot of times, you got to look at your students and how they're thinking on things and whether that is the 2 + 2, and they say, well, just a straight number, 2 + 2. If you had 2 apples and two apples, how much is that? Oh yeah, that's 4, or something to that effect. But it's a matter of, as teachers, a lot of times we'll think one way and then the students will think another way, and for various reasons, not that they're young or anything like that, but yes, but those are the kind of things that I'm looking at is to, how do we do that? And then try to apply those to like maybe a CTF or to our quizzes or to our labs or our cyber ranges or something like that to try to figure out a way that we can kind of help them along the way. Because if you're a beginner like my class and didn't know anything about networking, it's unfair for me to tell them to do an IP segmentation of that and then to tell me, if I have a 255, 255, 254, how many bits does a host have in the IP network? They're not going to have a clue as to what I'm talking about, right? So it's kind of unfair to that. So I need to start out in the beginning where you give them hints, you kind of nurture them along the way. As they become more intermediate or more advanced, you give them less information. You say, hey, well, just figure out this segmentation. Here's the subnet mask, And then is that, am I right sizing the network? Because I'm expected 20% increase and I have 100 devices on my network now. And so you need to assign the IP segment to this network. So how many host bits do I need? To accommodate that, or to at least minimize-wise, I would have enough to accommodate the 20% increase on my segment, those kind of things. So you kind of work your way up to there, and have them. One student of mine told me that he didn't want to use Google when he was taking one of the tests. I said, why not? I said, That's, in this case, is fine. He says, well, no, I need to know the answer right off the bat. You know, I said, no. As you get older, that's not going to happen. You know, and I, not that you're not going to get older. Right now, it's not going to happen. You're not going to know every answer out there. So you're going to have some means of being able to look up things or to do some kind of research. It's a matter of not giving up and saying, okay, here, I got to look at this and see. Or I'll just open up the book because I remember I read it in chapter 4, and I'll look it up and see, you know, however you have to do it. You know, that's my old school, right? You know, my dad had a slide rule and what they call a position table book. And in order to extrapolate out to so many digits, you did your calculation on there, and then you opened up your book, and then you go into the page and then extrapolated the digits up there, and that's how you did your math. So that's how he taught me how to do the slide rule, which I'm hoping it's close. It's been a while. But back in the day, right? Now, did you do that?
He said that's before me.
Oh!
I've seen this. It's really cool.
Okay, let me get out from behind the back.
It's on the black and white documentary.
Yeah, I get that all the time. I'll say, well, you remember that? And he says, well, I wasn't even. Let's move on. But that's kind of that. Let's see, what else? Oh, start with the mindset that you don't know everything, but they can figure it out. That's a challenge, you know. I think a lot of students in the beginning, they don't have the confidence, right? So they don't do it, or like they don't join the cybersecurity team because they feel like they know enough, you know, those kind of things, which you should, right? So it's kind of those things. I mean, we feel the same thing as adults. You know, there's certain things that happen out there, and then, you know, you're kind of hesitant. You know, I don't know. You know, I'm too old for that or something. You know, you get, you know, you're kind of excused, but you can figure it out. You know, you're not going to know it, but, you know, that's the thing I talked about with one of my other students too, because he wanted to know everything. When I said 9 out of 10 times, I remember when I was working in the industry, my boss or somebody would come up and said, you know, they have this problem, and they're telling me the problem. And in the back of my mind, I said, I have no clue as to what you're talking about, you know. But you go out there, you go and look at what the problem actually is, or wherever it is, you know. You're hoping that the person gives you enough information to know where to look. You start looking, and then it's starting to click and say, oh, yeah, well, it's doing that. That's because of this, you know. And eventually you figure out the problem. Or I have no clue yet, so I Google it. I'll look it up, you know, and try to figure it out. Or, yeah, I forgot how to configure radius, so I'm going to have to look that one up because it's been a while since I've done that. So, you know, there's different reasons as to why you don't remember. You could have known how to do it before, but it's like 2 years, you know, and you know, so you'll tend to forget some of those things that you don't do often. When you try to create creative problem solving, and to think of what is the possible instead, and go from there. I think I'm up, so I'm going to fly through this, and I want to grow the cybersecurity field, but that's meaningless if we don't have the quality and the competency of the students to go through there. So the trick is trying to get to identify the right people out there, and to try to identify the right people that matches to particular jobs. Because not all the jobs out there are ready for, you know, not being all analysts. We're not going to be network security. We might be mobile talents. That doesn't mean that you're dumb or you're not good at cybersecurity. That means you might have a specialty that you're looking in the wrong place. So trying to identify some of those things and try to find out local resources that can help you with that or help you understand what environment that you are best in, you know, and if that's what you like, or you don't like that and you like this, then you know, and focus a little bit more on trying to get your skills up with that. It's a combination of, and then trying to systemize it, because the problem we always have, and I'm talking to me, is all this stuff is good, but if I can't repeat the process, if it took me 2 months to figure it out and apply it to you, and it takes me another 6 months to apply it to you, it's going to be really tough. So you want to try to see if you can systemize it and see if you can have measured the metrics onto that. One of the solutions that I saw on the internet that they were talking about was using CTS, both at the company level and at the educational level, where they do training in a progressional level, and then in the company level, what they do is kind of like, you know, you do the psychological tests in some places that they do that. Well, they do the CTF and see how well you do in the certain instances, and you have specific scenarios that you set up to try to measure certain skill sets that you are looking for in a particular way, and then be able to judge some of your candidates that you know, kind of things like that. I think they do kind of do that with the programmers, because I've noticed programmers, they'll call you up, they say, oh yeah, let's go to this link, and then you got a 2 hour or 1 hour, and then you got 2 or 3 questions you got to answer in terms of programming, and you had to program a solution, something like that. So it's something similar to that, but only at a cybersecurity level. And thanks. That's it. Hey, any questions? Yeah, awesome.
I do. I always do. Being a high school teacher, I know you started to mention it, but what's the best way, or what should be the trajectory that I push kids towards that are broadly interested in these kind of topics? You know what I mean? Like, I know there's things that he wants to do with cybersecurity.
Because you guys are at the K-12, right, high school.
Trying to get these kids are really thinking about, you know, interests. That's why I'm here. I don't always have those answers yet, so I wanted to.
God, you're a rookie. I always have those answers.
Oh well,
This guy.
then he'll answer it. He'll answer it for you.
Obviously, send him to me.
I guess is looking at general security, you know, when you're talking about social engineering, the apps that you use, passwords, some of the basic stuff, passwords that you use, do you share your passwords? You know, do your parents share the passwords? Those kind of things. Security stuff. And then go from there and saying, there's been some studies known about, like with women, they like the concept of being able to protect. So kind of like, you know, well, you got to teach your grandmother to do this so that, you know, she doesn't get hacked, or, you know, all her money doesn't get taken, or something to that effect. You can approach it at that manner. The other things are, as they grow, and then they may have questions along the way, then you can kind of get a better idea of how you're going to answer the question. So, you know, the grandmother might have a Mac. You know, she's never seen a Mac before, and you can kind of talk through them and say, you know, well, it's Linux-based and blah, blah, blah. You know, you can kind of introduce some of that stuff, and you say, what is Linux? And then you can say, oh, well, let's do Ubuntu, you know, and then you can kind of build from their curiosity and kind of see with that. You know, I would build with the basics, you know, like Linux and Windows. Obviously, they would know Windows better than Linux, but try to look at Linux, and then the command line, please, let them know the command line. Command line and maybe some simple programming like Rust or Python or something to that effect.
Yeah.
There are a lot of free classes out there for programming.
Yeah.
So look around. I don't have any. I apologize. I don't have any resources for that.
If you were talking curriculum, what classes would you want the students to have before they come to you? In terms of math or English or?
As an employer, no. Everything.
Just trying to guide the kids to the right spots.
Yeah.
Are you pushing calculus?
What's hard in high school is not all high schools have the different programs in that. You know, they may specialize in certain things, but they might not have a networking class, or they might not have a PC club, or something to that
A
effect.
kid that's curious, right? Is that a lot of it too?
Yeah. Oh, I would introduce them to the virtual box, you know, and virtualization, and trying to do that, because they can experiment with that.
Yeah.
They can build there's some trial versions of Windows that they can experiment. There's trial version. There's Linux, and there's Kali. There's Metasploitable stuff. I would look into that from your side. Oh, there's a what's the site's name? It is by Sans. It's a tutorial. It is, I can't think of it. It is a tutorial, and it's really sweet. It is videos, and it walks them through Linux, Windows, networking, scripting, and that kind of stuff. It walks them through all those different things on there. The site's escaping me right now. But look up as Sans tutorial or something to that effect. And don't get it confused with the education. They have a college now. So that's a little different. But this is all free. This one is all free, and it's a video, and it walks them through how to build an image. And then it gives them exercises on how to look up your IP addresses and all that kind of stuff on a Linux machine and all that. So that gives them the basic stuff, because what's going to be first thing in cybersecurity is open source intelligence, right? You're going to have to try to find out what's going on. And then to be able to do all that, you want to know some of these commands that give you the information on the system that you're on or the network you're on as they grow more complex.
Thank you very much.
Mhm. I hope that wasn't too.
Cut into the next session by a couple minutes. So
Oh, I'm so
we'll
sorry.
continue conversations and stuff.
Okay. I can